Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hey, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm super excited to have you. Like after I was on your podcast, I was like, I need to keep her close because I know that I need to have you in my realm. And then when I saw your reel about like cervical dilation or cervix
Yeah,
dilation, like with the
yeah.
pottery wheel, I was like, okay, the end. Dear Sarah, can you come to my podcast? So my audience may or may not know you. So can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. So I am Sarah Marie Bilger. I also host a podcast called Entering Motherhood, and I am a wife and a mom of two and a doula. And really just kind of a birth nerd, and I love all things birth and pregnancy and postpartum. So
Okay.
that's me.
How did you get into like the birthing world? Like what
Yeah.
made you go like that's what I want to do? Because I feel like
Yeah.
people are either like, wow, that's amazing, or they're like, oh, give me the queasy stomach. Like, no thanks.
Yeah, it really started with my daughter's birth. She was born in 2019 and she was a unplanned cesarean.
Oh
And
no.
after that, I was kind of like, why in the world did this happen? I was planning on going completely unmedicated. I was going to do, all the natural birth and it was just going to happen and everything was going to work out the way it was supposed to. And when I ended up in a cesarean, I was kind of like, hold up, what happened? Why did I think that I could do this? And what kind of, like all those like what went wrong or like how could I have changed this or like why did this happen? Did it have to happen? And I kind of like really started to just research a lot more and look up a lot more and really needed to, I guess, like close the loop on what was kind of like running in my mind. And I was probably about like 6 months postpartum, and I was just like, who am I? What is going on? I was working full time in an office, corporate. My daughter was going back, or she started in daycare at 9 weeks postpartum. And that was hard. That was difficult. And I was just like, I don't think it's supposed to be this way. I don't think I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing, but what does that mean? Because my whole life I had been on this trajectory of go to college, get a job, work, and oh yeah, kids are going to somehow fit into all of
Of
that.
course.
And yeah. And so I've really just been on this 5 year journey of, like, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? What does that look like? How does it look differently? I had no idea what a doula was when I was pregnant with Rosie, my first.
Mhm.
My friend kind of suggested, how about you get a doula? I'm getting a doula. And I was like, all right, like, let's do all the things. And it really just kind of has progressed from there. I've gotten super involved in the birth working community and in, our local community, just virtually. I started the podcast. I started talking about all these things that people are, not commonly talking about. And then it just kind of has slowly progressed and expanded since then. And I love it. I love what I do. I was just at a birth today. And it's always just such an incredible experience watching and seeing what our bodies are capable of, going through a family's progression of finding out that they're pregnant and then like navigating postpartum. I do a lot of postpartum doula work as well. I just had twins recently, like not myself. I did like postpartum twin care and I loved that. And it was super really cool and a unique experience. So really just as I progress into it farther, I keep on affirming that this is what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. And it's the coolest thing in the world.
Okay, so I have one question for you.
Yeah.
Are you out of corporate now, or do you still do that?
So I actually put in my resignation this month. So I have
Congratulations.
been like picking up on clients and really kind of progressing in things. And I've made the leap of I can do this and it's gonna work out.
Yeah, the
So
net will appear, right?
yeah,
Oh, that's a
yeah,
wonderful. Isn't it the best when you can
yeah.
just like I'm out, and then you like get to do what you want to do, just like
Yeah,
show up.
it's super scary, but it's also super exciting because it took me a while to really get to this place. And it's been sort of a dream up until this point. Like, it's been like one of those, wouldn't it be really cool if I could just do this all the time?
Yeah.
And now I get that opportunity. And, I have full confidence that it's really going to continue to be a progression of finding more clients and really pick up. So I'm
Oh
excited.
my gosh. Okay, I love it. But before we jump into like all things birthing, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, what is a doula? Can you walk us through like what is that? What do they do? How do you find one? Tell us everything.
Yeah, so a doula can really range in many different aspects. There's birth and postpartum. There's even, death doulas and different kind of things. There's people that specialize in maybe pregnancy after loss, different scenarios that you're kind of going through. You can really find a doula that fits anything,
Okay.
but it's mostly emotional and physical support. So for a birth doula, typically it's somebody that's going to be supporting you and helping you navigate through all the different emotions and all the different things that are going on and helping you achieve whatever sort of birth preferences or plan that you have. So maybe you have this, agenda laid out of like what you want your birth to look like. A doula is able to really step in and show you how that's possible and give you kind of steps of suggestions or different techniques and help you achieve those things. And also during the birthing process, help you affirm and continue to do those things. So, for today, the mom was like, I want to go unmedicated if that's possible. And so my goal was to really like remind her of that and tell her how strong she is and that she's capable of doing it. But there was also a lot of prep work beforehand. I'm meeting with my clients beforehand at least twice in person, and we're really kind of walking through all the different scenarios and talking about different possibilities and what you're going to say if this happens or what would you do if this happened, and kind of just preparing them for what's to come. Also, informing them and educating them of birth in general. If it's a first time mom, then she's really kind of looking for all the information that she can, and Google and internet information can be really overwhelming. So to have a go-to person that
Mhm.
like, hey, I can ask anything to this person and they're going to give me their input, their insight, and you're finding somebody that you click with, that you really kind of want to hear their opinion and that you want to be present during those moments. And then as far as postpartum doula care, that again can vary and look different, but you're more so looking for somebody probably like I do more so like light housework tasks. I do overnight. So if you're kind of looking for somebody to be there so that you can sleep or that you can get some rest and they're kind of caring for baby in those like middle of the night hours, the first few weeks, I usually start working with a client 1 or 2 weeks postpartum, and I'll be with them for about 6 or 8 weeks. And that's 1 or 2 nights a week. And so really kind of finding a package that works for you. There's some people that want a doula, 5 days a week, like every night of the weeknight, and really just kind of like being there. There's also daytime postpartum care. So that's somebody, coming in, maybe chatting with you, processing the birth, just being an adult to talk to during the day and have
Yes.
conversation with. And letting you know that like all your feelings are valid. We're there to really say like, yeah, you're not alone. I've had those feelings, or I know other people that have had those feelings. And everything that you're kind of going through is perfectly normal. And if it sounds a little bit, like off or like something's like raising some red flags, we're trained and we know what to kind of suggest or how to kind of approach different situations. So I feel like there's a doula for everybody. And if you've never heard of what a doula is, definitely look into it and see if it's something that you can kind of fit into your budget and really kind of work into whatever kind of birth preferences and plans that you're looking to have.
I think that's really cool because it's almost like their right hand or like their right arm, like your right hand woman to like be there and like help you and do all of the things. Like that's really cool. I didn't realize that you did postpartum stuff as well. And you could get somebody like to come over like one night, 2 nights a week, or up to five, however
Yeah.
many nights a week that you want them to
Yeah.
come. I think that's really cool. Let's go back to the beginning though. What do you think women get wrong, or I mean, people in general too, it could be anyone, like get wrong or have these misconceptions about birth? Because I had this fear too, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to have a kid because what if I ruin my body, right? What if I don't snap back? What is it going to hurt? What's it going to be like? It's the unknowns, the uncertainties. So what are like a lot of the common questions or concerns that you get from women that, or even just families that are just navigating this? Is my life
Yeah.
ruined now? Like, am I ever going to be able to sleep through the night again?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of like, am I ready for this? What if I, ruin my baby? Like, am I doing
Yeah.
the right thing? It's a lot of, self-doubt or, am I like just not being prepared? And a lot of emotions are just kind of like coming up. And it's because it's unknown. You don't
Mhm.
know. Even like I like to say, it's not even just first time moms. It could be, second time, third time, fourth time. Like you're always going through it for the first time with every new baby. It's a
Yes.
different situation. It's a different scenario that you're navigating. A lot of people think like, oh, like going from 0 to 1 is a big deal. Like sometimes going from 1 to 2 is a big deal. Like now you're kind of navigating juggling two different lives and two different nap schedules and bedtimes and routines and things like that. So, and maybe you were really active with your toddler and now you're healing and recovering postpartum with your newborn. And so it's really kind of just knowing that like every scenario is different and that like you're able to navigate through it, but it's a matter of just sort of um gaining the confidence and talking with somebody or just talking with yourself even sometimes too to really affirm and solidify that like you can make it through and it's difficult sometimes but you're gonna get there.
So for second time moms, what would be your like biggest piece of advice?
Yeah, I think preparing in pregnancy, I think, preparing your toddler, talking with them, really kind of getting them familiar with your belly and even, postpartum, you'll have to be gentle. Depending on how old they are, they might be able to kind of have a conversation with you a little bit, or they might be able to be like very much a part of it. And just kind of knowing that like it's going to be different.
Mhm.
But like that's okay. I think it's really kind of like the age gap. Like for us, we like specifically wanted to avoid the 2 under 2, but I know plenty of people that have done the 2 under 2, and it's just some people are like, oh, I loved it because they went through the baby stage together and they kind of like we're all in diapers and now we're out of diapers and it's just sort of like this jam-packed season, and then you're kind of getting through other moments and moving forward. But I think it's just a matter of doing the prep work like beforehand and kind of preparing everybody, getting, sleep schedules in order and figuring out a routine of once baby comes, how are we navigating what we're currently doing. A lot of it was I was so used to, putting my daughter to bed every single night. And a lot of people are like maybe like mom and dad or, your partner and you are like both doing bedtime. And now a newborn comes and you need to tend to the newborn and it's going to be solo parenting for the other person or maybe you are like I don't want to say alone but like maybe like you are the only one with like both of these children, and so it's really kind of figuring out like okay like what kind of help can I get, who can come over, how is this logistically going to work out, and making a plan I think is always the best way.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. When my daughter was a newborn, my stepson moved in full time. She was like 4 months old. And my husband travels for work. So there were so many times that it was me with a teenager and a newborn, which it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. Like, okay, the teenager is like way older, right? Listen, my friend, toddlers and teens are so similar. Like they're just like bigger versions and they can like vocalize and they can like leave and all of the things. But my stepson, would always have like impeccable, horrible timing. He would always come like right at bedtime. He would always be asking me questions like right at nap time. Hey, can you do this? And I would be like, listen, dude, okay, we've got to read the room, okay? Like, look at me. look at me. Like I'm over here like trying to do this on my own. Like dad's gone, but like just give me a few minutes and I'll be right back. And it sucks because you don't want that other kid to feel like pushed out, right? And then I've got like the whole like stepmom stigma of like, oh, he's gonna think that I hate him. Even though like my stepson and I are really close, I'd be like, I don't want him to feel like he's a burden because I'm like, hey, hold, just give me a second, or I'm like was in the zone already, like almost to bed, like almost down for a nap time. And then he's like, hey, Alicia. And I'm like, no. I mean, I know, like with little kids, right? Like at least like little ones can't necessarily read the room, but I'm like, dude, give me just a second. But yeah, I think it's important to note that every pregnancy is going to be different. And in the stepmom realm, like, a lot of stepmoms I talk to are like, well, my husband or my partner has already been through this, so it's different. I mean, it's not going to be different. They're like, whatever, I've already got. Everything is different, right? Like you go in thinking you're going to have a vaginal birth, and then all of a sudden, like you've got an emergency C-section. So freaking common, but it's like everyone responds differently. Every birth is completely different. Like even if I were to have another kid, I'm not, but even if I were to have another kid, that pregnancy would be different. That birth would
Yeah.
be different. And I think that's important to note that so many people are just like, oh, I've already done this. It's going to be the same thing
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, baby can come at different times. You can have a preemie situation the second time. You can go way past your due date the first time. You can have, just an array of different scenarios and different outcomes and things and such like that. And so it's the same, if you had a not so great experience the first time doesn't mean like that's going to be the same scenario the second time. So maybe, a lot of times people say like, like the first baby, like maybe sleeps really well through the night and it's like super calm and relaxed. And then all of a sudden the second one comes and it's like mayhem. And it's like, wait, why did we decide to do this again?
Yeah,
And
right.
so, things that might have worked with your first no longer work with your second. And it's because it's a new person, it's a new human being, it's a new navigation. Maybe you're living somewhere differently or, your setup is differently. Like scenarios are different. My daughter was on like a super, super strict nap schedule. We were able to like always kind of find a time and uninterrupted naps and things like that. My son, he probably naps in the car more than all like than is in his bed. And it's just like the way that it works out and what kind of they're going through, like different, breastfeeding journeys or different, tongue ties, lip ties, different, outcomes and different scenarios going on. So you never really know, like even though like you've done it before, like doesn't necessarily mean like this time's going to be the same. And I think just keeping an open mind and making sure like you're still preparing and getting ready in different ways is a good idea.
Can we talk about a few of the things that you just listed off? So you talked about having a preemie. So more chances in a premature baby if you are not familiar with the terminology, and then the NICU, like natal intensive care unit. What does your role as a doula look like if you've got a preemie that's in the NICU?
Yeah, you mean like postpartum wise
Yeah.
or like so there are NICU doulas. There
Oh, okay.
are, people that do exist. I don't know of any specifically here in the Greenville area anymore. I do think that there like was one before, but a lot of it is kind of navigating with the parents and kind of like walking them through different scenarios. Most of the time, you're not expecting to have a
Yeah.
baby that is needed to go to the NICU. So it's really kind of like overwhelming a lot of different emotions. I had a client that delivered at 29 weeks. Her water had broken at around 28 weeks and she stayed in the hospital. And the hope was to, stay as pregnant as long as possible. And baby came within a week. And so they had a pretty lengthy NICU stay. And I connected them with, some virtual support groups, some local support groups here that kind of specialize in different like postpartum care and reproductive care, like things like that, that they could have that kind of support if needed. And a lot of the times it's just sort of making sure that they know that there are resources available and that the team there is helping them through different scenarios. And the NICU can be, like I said, like you don't expect that that's going to be the outcome unless there's, a reason for it known beforehand. But you're again just sort of shocked with the news and now having to face it, and you're already in it.
Hmm. And then what about breastfeeding? Because you said something about that. Like there's, obviously the controversial, like fed or breast is best, right? Where I wasn't able to breastfeed. So for me, it was like fed is best. Like let's just like feed the baby. So can you talk a bit about, I mean, I don't know how much you know about like different breastfeeding situations, dynamics, struggles, or if you help with that.
Yeah. So I say, like, if it hurts, it's probably something's going on, whether it's, a tongue tie, a lip tie, like there's going to be
Wait, can
some
you just can
discomfort.
you describe what those are just in case somebody's listening that doesn't?
Yeah. Yeah. So, essentially, like there's going to be some discomfort, but if you're really feeling a lot of pain or baby's not getting a great latch, then they could have a tongue tie, which means their tongue is not able to extrude out as much as possible. It's usually linked down to below their tongue. I don't know what that part's called.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about though. Yeah.
It's just sort of like not extend it as much as it can, so it can't latch on as well. Or they can have the same thing as a lip tie, so the spacing of their lips aren't able to fully go over the nipple and get as well of a pool during breastfeeding as they could. And so that can be evaluated by a lactation consultant, or sometimes the pediatrician is able to really kind of evaluate and see that if that is an issue. So if you're having, latch issues, or they're not staying on as long, or they seem to be like getting really tired, that can be something that's going on with like a tongue tie, lip tie. If it hurts, like even your nipples are like, painful, like rubbing up against your bra or your shirt or something going on like that, you may have a bacterial infection. I know if you are on antibiotics for a while during labor, you're more prone to having infections later on, like such as like thrush, nipple infections, and then baby can have an infection in their mouth as well. And so, like, a combination of all of those things can really be causing a lot more issues with breastfeeding, because if baby has, something in their mouth that's hurting them, they're not going to want to continue to do that. And then if you're having pain, then you're most likely not going to want to continue to do that. So it's a lot of different things. Sometimes there's, like overproducing, sometimes there's underproducing. There's a lot of different factors and things and such that really come into play.
Yeah, thank you so much for going through this. Because we hear these words, we hear these terminologies, and you're just like, what does that mean? Oh my God, is that happening to me? And then you're like, frantically checking the baby, or like Google is not your friend.
Yeah.
Google is not your friend. So I like that at the earlier you hit on like it's somebody I'm somebody that is dedicated to you, that you can come and ask like real life
Yeah.
advice or real life
Yeah.
scenarios, and not just like, dear Google, what is lip tie? What is tongue tie? Am I going? And you're like, no, please, 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 please stay off of Google. Like find somebody, like get a support group, like whatever it
Yeah.
is, do not go to Google. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And know that you can always get a second opinion from different
Yeah.
people too. Like if you're at your pediatrician and they're like, oh yeah, it's really not, that big of a thing, or like I've never heard of that. And you're like, no, like something is going on. Like if you have that, intuition, if you have a feeling that something's kind of off, or that something's going on, continue to reach out and continue to find somebody else that you can console with, and really ask like a deep question, or get real with, because I think just Googling stuff and kind of sitting with yourself is sometimes like the loneliest thing to feel.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great point to make. One at my baby shower, we had these little cards, like advice that you would give like the new mom, like me, right? And one of my girlfriends, her kids are older and like grown, but she had written, you know your kid best. And that like, oh, it kind of makes me like emotional thinking about it, because I was like, no, I don't. I don't even know what I'm doing. This is my first kid, like whatever. Anyway, but then now I'm like, oh yeah. So you do know your kid best, and you'll get to learn like the different cries, and like this one means that, or this means, and it's, you don't think that you're going to, but then you do. And just last week, my daughter had an ear infection. She's 5, right? Because she was born in 2019, like your kid. And um, we like got an emergency appointment in, but it was with a nurse practitioner, and she was like, she seems fine. And I was like, she's not fine though. Like, this is not her normal behavior. Like, she's
Mm-hmm.
really outgoing. She's got a big personality. So for her to be so quiet and timid here, that's not normal. Can you check X, Y, and Z, right? She had already said like her ears were hurting. And so they were like, oh yeah, let's take a look. But you know your kid's behavior best, or like if something is off, like at home, it's wild, like how much like you learn what they are, like how they are, and how much that factors in.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, I mean, in those first few weeks and like you're with them every day, all day, like going in with all those things. So like, yeah, you can pick up on different cries and coos and oh, that like it's so crazy though, like hearing like some first time parents and like their baby will be like 3 days old and they'll be like, oh, she always does this, or like he always does this. And I'm like, oh, always? Okay. But like those first few weeks are so, like it feels so long. Like you just because you're up every hour, you're up every 2 hours, you're really kind of like doing all these things that like it just feels like so much has happened and like they've been a part of your life for like forever.
Mhm.
And so like you start like getting in this routine of like they're doing this or they're doing that, and then sure enough it will probably like change and pivot
Mhm.
and something new will come along. But
Yep.
it's having like I have a 4 and a 2-year-old right now, and just like listening to other parents and everything, like first time parents in that first week and all the new little emotions. And I still get like so giddy and excited, but it's like seeing it as a parent that's kind of, I guess, more seasoned in the newborn stage and everything. It's like, okay, like you just kind of you let them
Yeah.
say that they always do that. And it is like their whole life they've done this.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
so
really
cute
cool.
though. Yeah, I
It
remember that.
is.
Yeah. And that's really
Oh,
cute. Talk to me about the difference between like postpartum care for like one newborn singular and postpartum care for twins or multiple. Like how different does that?
yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot less downtime.
Right? Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Most of the time parents of twins want to keep them on the same schedule as much as possible, same sleeping schedule, same feeding schedule and things like that. But with twins, like if one of them is kind of like a little bit more fussy or wants to be held longer or needs to be burped a little bit more, or one of them is sick, then the other one's bound to probably get sick. And so if you had like two sick babies, then it's double the everything going on.
Mhm.
So it's really just kind of like, you know, yes, it's like the same kinds of things are happening, but it is, I don't want to say like double the workload or like double
But it
the
is.
amount of like things, but like, yeah, like I mean, they're on the same schedule, like they're most likely like doing like a lot of the same stuff, but it is like, diaper after diaper and then like feeding after feeding, and it's just it's definitely different. But I would say, yeah, like you're not like wearing both of them or like holding both of them. It's kind of like juggling between the two.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have friends that have twins, and I just watch them. Like, I don't even know. I don't
yeah.
even know. Okay, so speaking of like same feeding schedules or nap schedules, do you help new moms like navigate like a schedule or setting up a schedule, or do you kind of just let them do whatever?
Yeah, so if they need
See you
help with
later.
that,
Good
I can
luck.
definitely if they need help with it, I can definitely like suggest. I'm not a sleep consultant or anything like that, but I do have like my own personal experience in helping other parents. So like if they're asking, like when should we, sleep or this, or what should the schedule look, when should naps look, I can definitely like walk them through that. But for the most part, I'm kind of just listening to what they want to do. Like, when's the last time they ate? When would you like them to eat? How long apart between feedings? feedings? How much are you feeding them? And really letting them control that. And I'm just, supporting it and doing, what's needed and listening to the different cues. Like if they're like, hey, look, we're trying to wait, 2 hours between the feedings, but if they seem fussy still and they need more, there's some more. And so sometimes it's like they'll prepare bottles beforehand, but then they'll be like a little bit extra just in case. So it's really kind of like listening to like what they want to do. And if they have or if they have, what is it called? If they want like my input or like suggestions or anything, I'm like definitely like way open to doing that. But first and foremost, I try to just like take their lead and do what they're looking to accomplish and
Oh,
just
yeah.
totally unbiased and whatever kind of, like you were saying, like fed is best or whatever it might be. Like if they want to do formula, I'm like, let's go. Like if they want to breastfeed, I'm like, let's go. Like really letting them guide their journey because like you were saying, like, like they know their baby best and they know what they want to do in those situations. So
Oh
I'm just
my
there to
gosh.
support and help.
I love it. Okay, so can we talk about like postpartum rage and like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm gonna murder my family. Like, how long does that last? What are some red flags of like, hey, maybe I should get some help? I mean, I know that you're not like a doctor, like trained in this part, but like, what are things that you see in women or in families that you're like, hey, let's have a conversation. You might need a little bit of
Yeah.
outside help outside of me.
Yeah, yeah. So there is like an array of postpartum mood disorders, a lot of different things that are going on. And I would say like it's not uncommon to just have bursts of like, a little bit of rage, a little bit of like what the heck moments. And most of the time it's like in the middle of the night and you're waking up and baby's waking up and you look over at your partner and they're sound asleep and you're like,
Mhm.
how do you not hear this? Or how are you not waking up? Or like the long exhale of like, I can't believe I have to do this again all by myself. It's sort of like those sort of emotions, or like you feel like maybe you're doing so much more work and they're not understanding. And I really think it just comes down to like communication and being really open and not being afraid to be like, hey, look, I wanna really get angry with you right now. Like I think I wanna like hit you or kick you out or do whatever. But like expressing those emotions and then being like, wow, I can't believe I said that out loud. And like now I'm listening to myself and maybe that's a little out there. But like also being able to kind of like recognize and see like, maybe like an outside perspective, like if you know somebody who's like newly postpartum or really like in that phase, if you hear them saying stuff or you can see the frustration, like maybe just saying like, hey, like how are you doing? Like, oh, like, do you want to talk about that? And like letting it be like a completely open, non-judgmental time for them to really just express what they're feeling and get it out. And then being like, like you can talk to me about this, but like if you feel comfortable talking to somebody else, or like maybe we can find you some resources, like not really leading with like, oh, that's not normal, or like, wow, you're crazy. Like, I can't believe you think that. And really just kind of being a support person for them, because sometimes our hormones do kind of go out of whack and there's a lot of different things factoring in and going on. Like there's postpartum psychosis and other like, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, like a lot of different mood disorders that are kind of like being brought to the forefront right now and really being talked about. And so I think just being aware of what's normal and what kind of might be like pushing it. Intrusive thoughts are totally normal. Like you're bound to have some sort of like, what if I just dropped my baby going down the stairs? Or like, like what's going on here? Like you get heightened emotions about, keeping your baby safe, or like that person's holding them wrong, or, like I need to get them back. They're really hungry. So it's totally normal to have the thoughts. It's just if it's extended amount of time and it's, I would say, like very extreme thoughts, then maybe try to, reach out to somebody and be like, hey, I know I'm kind of thinking this, but I don't want to, or I don't know if this is normal. And it never hurts to find somebody, even when you're still pregnant, that you're comfortable talking to, like going through like counseling or like some sort of group program, that you're learning these things. And if the time comes, you already have that resource, you already have that connection, and they already know what you were like before baby to kind of like give that comparison.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's a really great point though. And maybe if you're listening to this and you're like a headstrong, like very stubborn, very bullheaded, very like, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to do it my way, I would challenge you to try to like listen to somebody's outside perspective without taking it as like a criticism. Like, hey, Sarah, I've noticed lately that you've been talking about this, that, or the other. Like it appears as though you might be struggling, right? And maybe your partner's not going to come off like in that kind of a way, but rather than being defensive and being like, no, I'm okay, like I've got this, right? The more your back gets up, the more like to me, it solidifies that like, hey, maybe something is wrong, but trying to take that with an open mind and just trying to be like, okay, I don't want to hear this, but I'm hoping that this person actually has good intentions and they're trying to help me and maybe I need some help. But I like what you said, like finding a support group prior to, so then that those people, that person has a baseline of what you were like prior to.
mhm.
And then now they're like, wait a minute, Sarah, are you okay? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And really, having that resource there before it comes to like now you're scrambling to find a resource, or
Mhm.
you're, lost for like, you don't know who to contact or who to get in touch with, or, again, like you're just sitting with yourself, Googling things.
Yeah, no, stop
And
Google. Yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
my pediatrician office had like a bunch of really great flyers on the wall. I'm one of those nerdy people that like reads all of the flyers, right? But they had like mommy and me groups, if you need a lactation consultant, if you are you struggling with this or that? Like there were always, and I would like take pictures of them. And I definitely went to like all of the mommy and me groups. Like that was like a lifesaver. And then COVID happened, right? Yay. But let's talk about when you had just mentioned when you've got the baby and somebody else is holding them and maybe they're holding them wrong, but then also, maybe you don't want people kissing your kid, or maybe you like
hmm
the baby is screaming, like, give it back to me. And it's hard to like navigate that. So how would you help potentially, I don't know if you deal with this too, but like give a new mom the words to form to like get those things to happen?
Yeah. I would definitely, like practice with somebody that like and you trust that is going to like give baby back, or
Mhm.
maybe that's your partner, maybe it's like a really close friend. And so you can be like, look, like lately, like, I love our family coming over and I love that they all want to see the baby and like they all want to do this, but like it really gives me anxiety, or I like, I have trouble doing this. Like do some like role playing and like really kind of like work through like those different scenarios. So like when the situation comes up, you do feel confident and you're not ashamed to say like, hey, look, I need to hold my baby now because like for me and for my sanity and for like everything that I'm going through, like
Yeah.
I need to know that they're safe in my arms just for a moment. And then you can like have them back again. Or like, hey, like I really need to feed them right now. It's their feeding time. And like go into a different room by yourself and like go have that moment with them.
Mhm.
And I think it's definitely kind of like a learning curve, and it's getting to a point of like you don't feel ashamed of wanting to express your feelings or like say how you feel. And hopefully, if that friend or family or whoever is holding your baby is supportive, they'll be like, oh yeah, completely, here's your baby back. Like if you're having somebody that like you have to navigate with who's like, oh no, like this is, my baby now, or like, oh, I just started holding them, and things like that can be like really difficult. But again, if your partner is aware of like how you're feeling and how you're kind of like having anxiety around certain situations, maybe they can help be a buffer too, so that like if you start to get antsy or itchy, or you're like, oh my gosh, like this person better give me back my baby, they can be like, oh hey, like come on, like let's just let her have the baby back, or whatever it might be, to really kind of maybe even lay the groundwork beforehand, that like
Yeah.
they can have those hard conversations with friends and family that are kind of like, hey, look, like, let's just be open to holding the baby like whenever we can, or like, hey, look, we're not kissing the baby until they're at a certain age, or like we can, kiss on top of a hat or like on their onesie or something, but we're not doing like skin to skin, like any kind of kissing, things like that. And like backing it up with like, I think COVID definitely kind of helped solidify a lot of those things because people are like, oh yeah, like you can get germs and things can like, be worrisome and things like that. But I think like just laying it out there and being like, hey, like I'd really appreciate it if you washed your hands before you held the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they understand. And I think most of the time, like you'll be surprised that like they actually do respond in a very like accepting way and like, oh yeah, sure, 100%. Like I'll go wash my hands. And
Mm-hmm.
like you're not getting, butt up against those things. But I'm sure, there's definitely people that you probably will come across and be like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
Or you'll get like,
why do I
oh,
have to
because
do
it's your
that?
first, you're acting like this, but with your second, you won't care.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is some validity to that, right? But as a first time mom, this is my first, like, let me have it, right? So that's what I would say when people are like, well, it's your first, so that's why you're acting like that. You're right, it is my first. So go ahead and give me the baby back. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't try to play me like that. Okay, so let's
Yeah.
move on to we've now had a baby, so now we're gonna be a second time mom. Talk to me about the VBAC and like what is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Is it possible? What's going on? So first things first, what is that?
Yeah, so a VBAC is a vaginal birth after cesarean, and it is 100% possible for, I would say, 99% of births. And there are, like some different circumstances. And really, I would say it's like finding a provider who is ready to support you through it. That's probably the most difficult part of achieving a VBAC. Finding somebody who is willing to say, like, yes, I think you're a good candidate. Let's move forward. I totally support you. I think you can do this because you'll need to have, somebody helping you unless you're, having other alternative methods of birthing. But really finding somebody who's gunning for you, who believes in you. Also, pairing up with a doula who is maybe specialized in VBAC or, looking at online courses and things like that that are good resources for it. But it's totally possible. Even, I think it used to be like once a cesarean, always a cesarean kind of like thrown out there. And so a lot of times people weren't even like trying to like have a vaginal birth after a cesarean. And there are still, a lot of people that choose to have an elective cesarean after an unplanned cesarean or, elective cesareans from the start. And I think, every choice is valid and every way that you want to birth your baby is totally up to you. And sometimes for the repeat cesareans, moms are just so traumatized from their first experience that they're like, look, if I never have to go through that again, I want to avoid that. So let's just schedule a cesarean so that I can have my choice in the say and I can experience it in a more peaceful way rather than an emergency way.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really just kind of like if you want to have a vaginal birth after cesarean, it's definitely worth going for and trying. And really kind of just seeing all that goes into that. It's a lot of mindset work. It's a lot of kind of like processing and understanding like new baby, new birth, like this is
Mhm.
going to be different. There could be different circumstances, what led you to have the cesarean the first time. And so really kind of like playing through those things and saying like, what are the chances that this is going to happen? If you had a breech situation, you couldn't find a provider that would be willing to deliver a breech. And so you had a cesarean for your first. Now, this baby, if they're, head down, everything's looking good. It's, new baby, new birth, and new scenario. So it's really just kind of what do you want? And do you want to try for a vaginal birth? Then go for it.
Yeah. I feel like there's this like unwritten rule, and we'll talk about this in a second, but like if you have an unmedicated vaginal birth, you get like the golden star. You get like the trophy. Like, well, I had a vaginal unmedicated birth, so I'm like a better mom than you who had an epidural, or a better mom than you that had a cesarean. And I'm like, No, for the record, I did not have an unmedicated vaginal birth. I was like, give me the epidural. Like, yes, like we need to do this. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, can you talk about like medicated versus non-medicated and pros and cons to both?
Yeah, I really feel like to go unmedicated, it is a journey. It is
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
like you definitely, I mean, there are those like rare anomalies of like you walk in and you just like somehow magically have like an unmedicated birth and you weren't even like planning for it or like,
Not me. No way.
yeah. You like essentially sneezed your baby out. Like
Yeah.
there is, weird, crazy like unicorn births of things. But for the most part, if you're going for an unmedicated birth, like you are doing some like really powerful prep work, mindset work. You're really kind of like navigating different techniques and methods. And I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking. Okay. Really kind of like laying down like the groundwork and knowing, what is going to happen? What am I going to be feeling? What am I coming up against? And really going through that. And then, yeah, I mean, if you want to just, walk in and get the epidural right away, like go for it. And like again, I think finding a doula, like there are some doulas that like will strictly only do home birth. So if you're doing a home birth, that is unmedicated. Like you are
Mhm.
not getting pain medications like you would at the hospital at home. And so really knowing what you're getting into and being like totally confident in whatever decision you make, I think is key. So whether you want to go for that planned cesarean, whether you want to have a unmedicated birth, just I say like informed and like confident decisions in whatever it might be. And somebody's forcing you to have a cesarean, if somebody's forcing you to, I don't know who would force somebody to go on medicated, but I think like now too, like people are worried like, oh, what if it's too late to get the epidural? Like what I'm gonna like get there and it's like past the point. I will say like usually it's never too late. And like unless you're really already at the pushing stage, then maybe it doesn't kick in. Maybe it doesn't really like work. But as far as like pros and cons, obviously if you're going unmedicated, you're not having any sort of medication administered and you're not having like escalated risk factors and things of that such as far as like what the medication can do or like adverse, maybe you're like, I'm getting the epidural and then you get the epidural and it doesn't kick. It doesn't, really set as well as you were planning on it and you're still feeling most of everything. And so, really just being like open and aware of those things. Like if you don't want to feel a single thing and then you think that the epidural is going to be like an end all be all and you're still feeling all the pressure, you're still feeling like some discomfort and you're just like, wait, I thought, I wasn't going to feel anything. Again, just being like informed and confident in whatever decision that you're making, I think is the best way to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I will say that I had so many questions because, I'd been a stepmom, so I'd already like been in a motherly role, but then like pregnancy like really freaked me out. Like I would tell my husband like, "Oh, you know what? By the time like this is how like I wasn't delusional because I knew that this wasn't true, but like how like hopeful thinking I was. I was like, okay, by the time I have this kid and like 7 months at that point, like they're gonna just be able to like teletransport the baby out. Like we're gonna be good. It's gonna be okay. Like I was really freaked out by birth, like what's gonna happen, like all of these things, right? Google my friend is not your friend. And he was like, Alicia, it's gonna be okay. Like whatever happens, like we're gonna get through it, right? And so I would every time I'd go to the OBG, I'd be like, listen, lady, I have got a million questions. Like, let me ask you all of them. And she was like, are you I was never like, I have to be medicated or unmedicated, like none of that. Like, I was just like, I'm just gonna show up and like, we'll just wing it. No, actually, I found out we're not just gonna show up and wing it. Like, we did do like a birthing class before and like all the things. And I learned a lot, like about, like your reel that I was talking about, like the opening of your cervix and like all of the different things, right? It was really like eye-opening to me. But my OBG was like, Alicia, it's 2019. If you want to get an epidural, get the epidural. Like, who cares? No one cares. No one's gonna be like, hey, did you have the epidural or not? Like, oh, all of the things, right? So I was like, okay, I'm gonna get this. I get to the hospital, I drove myself, like I was packed, like ready to go because I knew potentially my husband wasn't gonna be here. Sure enough, he wasn't. And but I'm not really that dilated. And so they let me sleep through the night. They're like, just get some sleep because you're gonna need it. And he had showed up before like 7 o'clock that night, and I got there at like noon. And then I got Pitocin like 8 o'clock the next morning. And then the contractions started. And to be honest with you, like now I don't really remember them, but I remember thinking like I might die. I think that I might die. And so I had said to my husband, like, I think I'm gonna need that epidural sooner rather than later. And they were because I was already like I can handle pain, but I get like squirmish. Like I just start to like squirm around. And so he had said to one of the nurses that was there, like she wants an epidural, and they're like, it's not time yet. And I was like, you tell them if I do not get this epidural now, I am not going to get it. And he was like, if you don't give it to her now, she's not going to be able to hold still. And sure enough, I wasn't. But like my epidural worked great. Like it was wonderful. But then because I had Googled, I was freaked out about the epidural, right? Like all of the possible things that could go wrong didn't happen. But like you just get freaked out. So then I was freaked out and I'm like, oh my gosh. So now I have to deal with this too. And then honestly, like my epidural was amazing, but I would like, they'd be like, Alicia, push. But I was so relaxed that I was like, this is great. If I could have like an epidural like 24/7, I could like pop out all these babies until we got to the Ring of Fire. And then I was like, what is happening? So can you talk about that? Like, what is happening?
Yeah,
No one tells you about that. I
um,
don't know if that's what you call it, but that's what they called it for me. I
yeah,
was like,
yeah, it's
whoa.
kind of right. It's kind of just like a lot of pressure going on. It's usually when like baby's really crowding, you're being like stretched to maximum capacity. There's a
Whoa.
lot of sensation, there's a lot of feeling. It's just it's yeah, it's a lot going on like all at once, all kind of centralized in that area. And so a lot of people just like aren't aware of it, and it's really hard to explain unless like you've been through it or like had it, like kind of like when you explain like kicks inside of your belly, like it's a sensation that like you can't replicate. And so a lot of the times it's just sort of like you're probably going to feel something a little bit different, and like it's just really that last final push of when baby's coming.
Yes.
So it's sort of, again, like pain with purpose
Aha.
and
Yeah,
just
pain for
sort
sure.
of, yeah. And just knowing that like it's not going to, I mean, I have like a full sleeve of tattoos, and whenever I've kind of like gotten my tattoos, it's like, look, like this is going on right now, but it's not going to last forever. And
Yeah.
so like and then you get a baby afterwards. So I think really kind of like understanding that like you're still going to feel different sensations, you're still going to feel the pressure. Like a lot of people, again, like I said, like they think like, oh, I get the epidural, like I'm not going to feel a thing. And it's like,
Wrong.
no, like you're still feeling some of the pressure, like you're still feeling like different sensations. And so really kind of like understanding and being open to, they can stop like the blockers for like some receptors, but they can't like completely uh block it out.
Oh, why? No, I'm just
So
kidding. But yeah, I was like,
yeah.
what is happening? This is crazy. And she was like, it's okay. This is totally normal. This is the Ring of Fire. And I'm like, the what the?
Hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
and once I'm not going to go into gruesome detail because I don't want somebody that is like me and like be squeamish and be freaked out about having a kid. But I was like, whoa, I did not know anything about this. And yikes, like this is crazy. Okay, one last thing to like end on a funnier and not so funny note, but people are always freaked out about maybe I'm gonna poop during birth. Like what? Oh my gosh, my partner's gonna see this. Can you talk to us about this? And like it's totally normal.
Totally normal. Yeah, I mean, you got to think like you have a head down there. It's putting a lot of pressure. If you have anything in your colon, if you have anything kind of like happening down there, it's most likely that you're going to poop and it's going to happen. So like I would say like don't be worried about like not eating as much like later in pregnancy, or like, oh, like I can't have a big meal like before like I'm going to get induced because like what if I poop it out? Like it happens. It's totally normal. baby sometimes poops immediately when they come out too. So it's just a lot of different fluids, a lot of, you have the vernix and the blood and all the different fluids that are going on inside the uterus and everything, and blood. And I think it's just kind of like, it just adds to it. And like, it's nothing that the nurses have ever seen before. And, any of your providers or like wherever you are. And, if you're worried about like your partner seeing it or whatever, like just tell them to look away. Most of the time, like it's just getting kind of like swept up and like you don't even know that it happened. And you have a whole bunch of other things happening that you're not even like paying attention to what's going on down there.
Yeah.
So I think it's just like, sure, yeah, it might happen, but so what? Like you're about to be like exposed to so much poop as a mom anyway.
Yeah,
that
it's
why
gonna
not
be,
just like kick it off and start it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I delivered in a hospital, and so I'm like in the Ann Arbor area, so U of M is right here, but I didn't deliver there, but one of my girlfriends did, and she was like, it's a research, like a training, not a research, but like a training hospital, right? And so she's like, I felt like everyone in the world had seen my vagina at that point, because there was like students coming in and out, and she was like, I don't have any decency anymore. Like, you want to have a look, come in, come on, everyone come on in, like just have a look. And I kind of felt like that too. Like, different nurses coming and like, here, let me just check, like, how far are you dilated? And I'm like, here you go. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, for a little while, like your decency, you're just like, I don't care. Like,
Yeah.
what do you need
Yeah.
to know?
Usually it kind of like starts off like, like you keep the robe on, you're a little
Yeah.
modest, you're like, covering everything up. And by the end of it, like most moms are naked or like,
Yeah.
fully exposed. And
Yeah.
it's just like you're doing what you need to be doing. And like whatever kind of is out there, it's like no longer, I mean, not saying that it's like your like personal private parts or anything, but like
Yeah.
it's like it's serving another purpose. Like when I'm watching a baby coming out, I'm not seeing a vagina and a head there. Like I'm like literally just like amazed by the baby, and I'm looking at like different aspects of how the mom's pushing and different things like that like it doesn't even register the same way.
Yeah.
So it's a really, and like I mean that's how most of like the providers and the nurses and stuff are feeling too. Like it's birth. It's not the same as if like you're kind of like laying out in your backyard like
Yeah.
naked or
Completely different
something.
context.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
get like questions or concerns from people going through birth about that? Like, oh my gosh, what about my vagina? Like, do I,
Um, I
or
don't
are they
really
like,
get like
whatever?
yeah, I don't really get like specific questions about that, but like I mean, some people will say like, like should I get like waxed or shaved or like oh like like things like that. And it's like literally whatever you feel comfortable with,
No one
because
cares.
nobody cares. We've seen it all. And whatever like you feel most comfortable with and you're ready for and wanting to do, then I say like go for it.
Ah, I love it. Oh my gosh, Sarah, this has been so good. Like, thank you so much for being like so open and
Thank
vulnerable. And like,
you.
I'm like, oh, let me share my birthing story. Not that I like have ever, but where can everyone find you online? Where do you live? What's going on?
Yeah, so wherever you can find this podcast, you should be able to find Entering Motherhood. So that's the
Mhm.
podcast that I host. And I have weekly episodes that come out, and I've been doing that since 2021. And then I love Instagram. I am on there most of the time, all the time. You can message me on there. And then my website is enteringmotherhood.com. So you can find all my resources there, all past episodes and different things that are going on in the motherhood world.
Thank you so much. This has been really, really fun. Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and a review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.